Tears of the Kingdom is finished. Zelda series producer A.G. Aonuma recently clarified that we were able to implement all of the elements that we wanted to achieve in this world and this story, so there will not be any DLC. So there it is, the largest, most ambitious, and in many ways, the best Zelda game to date. The gigantic expansion to Breath of the Wild's already monstrous, seamlessly explorable world packed with content is complete. The Zelda team don't plan on releasing DLC for DLC's sake. Even though Tears of the Kingdom broke the record for the fastest selling Nintendo game of all time, they've accomplished everything they wanted for this version of Hyrule. In a different interview, Aonuma stated that, "We feel like we've already fully explored and exhausted the gameplay possibilities in this world. Initially, the reason we decided to develop a sequel was because we believed there was still value in experiencing new gameplay within that particular Hyrule. If, in the future, we find a compelling reason, we may revisit that world once again." So, for now at least, it seems that the wild era of The Legend of Zelda has come to an end. What's next? Whether it's another sequel or an entirely new title, I believe the next game will offer a completely new experience. I hope you'll look forward to it. A.G. Aonuma's comments about whatever game follows Tears of the Kingdom have been characteristically vague. We know that there is, of course, a new main Zelda in production. The team are always working on the next game, but exactly what that looks like is a mystery. We do know, however, that despite it being a completely new experience, it will probably be built on the foundations of Breath of the Wild. In a recent interview with Game Informer, Aonuma said that, "Now we've arrived at Breath of the Wild and the new type of more open play and freedom that it affords, yeah, I think it's correct to say that it has created a new kind of format for the series to proceed from." This was in reference to how Ocarina of Time, the game that brought the Zelda series into the third dimension, became the blueprint for the games that followed, all the way up until Breath of the Wild broke the mold. So it's safe to say that whatever the next main entry in the series ends up looking like, it will probably be built around a core that is very similar to Breath of the Wild, just like how Majora's Mask, The Wind Waker, Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword are all based on the foundations of Ocarina of Time. This doesn't mean that we can expect to just get another Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, however, just that the core design philosophy of these games will likely continue into the next: unparalleled freedom. During development of Breath of the Wild, the Zelda team refrained from using the term open world to describe the game. Instead, they started to call it open air. Bill Trinan said that, "From my perspective, I look at a lot of open world games and the world is a setting for the story the developers want to tell in that space. I look at this game and I see a world that is fully integrated into the exploration and adventure. It's not just a world that you're passing through, it's sort of a world that you're part of. So much of the adventure and exploration is in this outdoor space. And the theme of wilderness collectively seemed like open air was the right fit for it." Series creator Shigeru Miyamoto grew up playing in the open countryside of rural Japan, exploring fields and caves, which eventually led to a passion for mountain climbing and hiking. When he began game development, he poured this love for the outdoors into his work. When describing the development of the original Legend of Zelda game, he likened it to giving players a miniature garden they could keep inside their drawer. Meaning, the goal was to create an experience that captured the wonder of exploration, to take an NES cartridge and squeeze onto it an entire wilderness that players could adventure through, just like how Miyamoto himself once explored the countryside near his house. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom come the closest to finally achieving this dream of Miyamoto's. This Kingdom of Hyrule, especially the sequel's expanded version, is as seamless and open as the Switch can handle. Tears of the Kingdom has, by far, the greatest, most immersive world of any game I've ever played. Link can travel from floating islands in the skies far above one end of the map to the deepest reaches of the depths on the other side without ever running into a loading screen or invisible wall. At the very core of these modern Zelda games is the desire to realise as open a world as possible for players to explore, and this is the soul which will all but definitely return in whatever game follows up on the Wild era. Personally, I'd love for the next Zelda to once again throw us into a completely new, gigantic, seamless world, built with the same level of care and attention to detail that Breath of the Wild's was, but one that reintroduces some of the older game's classic elements. More traditional dungeons, an item progression throughout the game, and a story that develops in the present alongside your adventure. This was something I had hoped for Tears of the Kingdom, that it would be a game that took the foundations of Breath of the Wild, then built a more traditional Zelda experience on top of its world. Instead, Tears of the Kingdom doubled down on almost everything Breath of the Wild introduced, amplifying its strengths, but also further exposing the weaknesses of open-air Zelda. This divide between old and new Zelda is obviously something that the developers are aware of. In another interview, Aonuma said that, "It's difficult to say anything about the future. That being said, thanks to previous Zelda games, a game like Tears of the Kingdom now exists. This game originated from ideas that we had in the past. We always try to create something that offers more than previous titles. In that respect, we aren't really concerned with our older games anymore. We prefer to look to the future." Meaning, the past is done. The developers consider the new style of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom an evolution of the older Zelda formula, and it doesn't seem that they plan on looking back at the classic games for inspiration going forward. Personally, I hope that there are significant changes to the open-air format in the next title, and I'm sure that this will be the case. There are truly no end of possibilities for where open-air Zelda could take us. Imagine a game with the bones of Breath of the Wild, set on a Wind Waker-esque ocean, with a submerged kingdom forgotten in its depths, where Link can freely sail between islands or swim through the waters to find lost treasure and sunken ruins. We could even see a futuristic, sci-fi take on Zelda, an idea which has been toyed with by the developers time and time again since the series' inception. While I'd prefer for Zelda to remain a high fantasy, sword and sorcery adventure game, the developers have said that as long as they retain the essence of Zelda, they feel that they have the freedom to transform Zelda into many different things, while keeping it connected to its roots. Whatever direction the next open-air Zelda takes, it will still capture the soul of the series. The next main 3D Zelda game is almost certain to release on Nintendo's next home console system, whatever follows on from the Switch. As of right now, we don't know much at all about this console, but we probably will know quite soon. According to a few sources, Nintendo were quietly present at Gamescom 2023 last month, where they demonstrated their next system to select developers, showing off the system's power by running a souped-up version of Breath of the Wild, with a higher frame rate and resolution. This doesn't mean that Nintendo actually plans on releasing a remastered Breath of the Wild on the next system, only that that game was chosen to highlight the console's increased power. So whatever the next open-air Zelda is, it'll almost certainly be running at a much nicer resolution and FPS than the two Switch games. Remember, the Zelda team got a game as massive and seamless as Tears of the Kingdom to run on the Switch, a console that was considered underpowered when it launched back in 2017. We don't yet know exactly what specs the next system will have, but I can only imagine how great Zelda will look on it. The big problem though is just how long games this size take to develop. There was more than 5 years between Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild, and even longer between that game and its sequel. Games on this scale just take a lot of work to create, so even though development has already begun on the next one, we shouldn't expect to see it launch anytime soon. So what can we expect from the Zelda series in the meantime? Most obvious is remakes and remasters, which Nintendo have been drip feeding us for years, most recently with Skyward Sword HD in 2021. The Switch is still missing the remastered versions of the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, which had both previously launched on the Wii U. These games being ported to the Switch is something absolutely everyone was convinced of, but in the 7th year of the console's life, it still hasn't happened. We could see these games squeeze onto the very end of the Switch's life, especially if Nintendo are holding back bigger releases for the next system, but it might not end up happening at all. But other remakes and remasters are possible, on the Switch and whatever comes next. Porting the Grezzo 3D N64 games, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D could be an option, as could be an upscaled A Link Between Worlds, or a remake of a game like the Minish Cap or the Oracles. But aside from remakes and the next big 3D entry, what I want most from the series going forward is a return to 2D top-down Zelda. The series of course began with the top-down Legend of Zelda on the NES, with A Link to the Past fully cementing the formula later on. Despite this, we haven't gotten a new 2D Zelda game in 10 years, since A Link Between Worlds in 2013, and even that was closely based on A Link to the Past, reusing its overworld. The Switch, of course, saw a gorgeous remake of Link's Awakening, which adds a fresh coat of paint and a ton of charm to one of the most solid entries in the series. While the game barely holds a candle to the monstrous sales numbers of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the Link's Awakening remake shows that 2D Zelda games still work today. The series' roots haven't been made obscure by the direction of the main games. In fact, with the flagship titles taking such a massive shift away from the classic formula, and with the developers confirming that they intend for this change to be permanent, 2D Zelda games could be a way to keep the spirit of traditional Zelda games alive, with classic dungeons and item progression, while the 3D games continue to strive towards openness and freedom. It's interesting that 2D Mario games have been in a similar rut to 2D Zelda games. Aside from Mario Maker, there hasn't been a new main series 2D Mario game that doesn't come under the umbrella of New Super Mario Bros. Since 2006, until now, with Super Mario Wonder slated to release next month. This game seems like the perfect way to reintroduce 2D Mario, a completely wacky, unapologetically creative take on the platformer that is still firmly rooted in the series' DNA. I'd absolutely love to see 2D Zelda get a similar treatment. A brand new top-down adventure, made with the same passion and creativity as Wonder, to resurrect this somewhat forgotten branch of Zelda games. A 2D Zelda that lets us play with crazy new mechanics and ideas, yet is built on classic foundations. With the long wait for the next 3D game ahead of us, a fresh take on top-down Zelda could be a way to bridge this gap, and rekindle interest in a type of game that doesn't take upwards of half a decade to produce. But what do you think? What do you want to see from Zelda's future? Are you excited to see what follows on from Tears of the Kingdom? Would you like to see 2D Zelda make a return? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like, or subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content. As always, a huge shout out to my channel members, including Myth Tier members Betman93, ZeldaButAGrl, Lily, RiceGlites, Vampyfoot, Celestial Kitsune, Monkey Gamer Z Official, and Gerudo Eli. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.